She inherited the empire. Now she has to earn it. They thought she was going to walk in there and apologize for existing. They thought she was going to prove herself to them. Baby, they had no idea. She didn't come to prove anything. She came to collect what was already hers. Welcome to Corporate Chaos Scandals, the place where you hear the most shocking, messy, and unbelievable confession stories. From office drama to secrets people were never supposed to share, nothing is off limits. Before we get into this one, make sure you subscribe and like, because we bring you stories like this every week. Trust me, you will want a front row seat. Now settle in, because this is not just a story about a woman taking over a company. It is about what happens when she is told she does not belong and decides to prove everyone wrong. This is Francine Davidson's story, and it starts with loss. Evander Davidson built Davidson Media from a single radio station in Atlanta, Georgia, in 1987. One station, a borrowed transmitter, a rented office the size of a walk-in closet, and a voice. Lord, that man had a voice that could make you believe anything was possible if he said it slow enough. By the time the 90s rolled through, he had 3 stations. By 2000, he had television. By 2010, Davidson Media was a full-spectrum media conglomerate. Broadcast, digital, print, streaming partnerships. Offices in Atlanta, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and London. Over 2,000 employees, a household name in Black media, a household name in all media. Evander Davidson was the kind of man that other men called Sir even when they outranked him. He had that gravity, that presence. He'd been on the cover of Black Enterprise 4 times and Forbes twice. He'd shaken hands with presidents and turned down a Senate appointment because, as he told the story, I make the news. I don't become it. He had 1 daughter, Francine Davidson. And on a cold Thursday morning in February, at the age of 71, Evander Davidson's heart gave out quietly in his sleep. No warning, no dramatic final words, just there one night and gone by morning. The will was read 6 days later. Evander had left Davidson Media, all of it, controlling stake, CEO title, full operational authority, to Francine. Not to the board, not to the executive committee, not to Marcus Webb, the chief operating officer who had been with Evander for 22 years and who had absolutely, privately, definitely assumed the company would pass through him. To Francine, his daughter, his blood, his legacy. And the moment that will was read, every person in that conference room smiled at Francine with their mouths. Their eyes were a completely different conversation. Let me tell you something about Francine Davidson because I need you to understand exactly who walked into that building on her first official day as CEO. This woman had a bachelor's in media studies from Howard University, graduated summa cum laude, a master's in business administration from Wharton, and a Juris Doctor from Yale Law School. 3 degrees, 3 elite institutions. She had worked at Davidson Media since she was 27, first as a junior acquisitions analyst, then in content strategy, then as VP of digital expansion, a division she had personally grown from $4 million in revenue to $47 million in 3 years. She knew this company. She had bled for this company. She had sat in meetings where her father challenged her harder than anyone else in the room because he wanted no one to be able to say she didn't earn her seat. And none of that mattered to the men waiting for her on the 14th floor. She walked in at 8:15 a.m. sharp, early. She'd been told the executive team gathered at 9. She walked past reception, smiled at Denise on the front desk, who had been there since Francine was 12 and cried a little when she hugged her, and took the elevator to 14. The executive floor was already buzzing. Marcus Webb was at the coffee station when she walked in. He turned around. He was 56, silver-haired, expensive watch, the kind of man who was used to being the most important person in any room he entered. He looked at her, really looked at her, and then he smiled. "Francine, welcome. We're all so glad you're here." He said it the way someone says, "Bless your heart" in the South. All warmth on the surface, ice all the way down. "Thank you, Marcus," she said. "I'm glad to be here. I'll need the full operational report on my desk by 10. All divisions, current projections, outstanding issues, personnel flags." His smile held. "Of course. I'll have my team." "Your team reports to me now," she said pleasantly. "So, by 10. Thank you." She walked into her father's office, her office, sat down behind his desk, placed her hands flat on the surface, looked out at the Atlanta skyline, and she breathed. She had maybe 30 seconds before the warfare began. She knew it. She'd known it since the will was read. She used every one of those seconds. They didn't come at her loud. She would have preferred loud. Loud, she could answer directly. Loud, she could shut down in front of witnesses. No. They came at her quiet, organized, with the particular cruelty of men who have been in power long enough to know that the sharpest weapons don't make any noise. The first board meeting was a Tuesday. 12 board members, 7 of whom Evander had appointed personally over the years. She had studied all of them, their holdings, their voting history, their professional relationships, their public positions, and, because Francine was her father's daughter, the things they didn't put in writing. She came prepared for everything. What she got was something she hadn't quite anticipated. Not opposition, not exactly. Absence of authority, of basic professional respect. When she spoke, they listened, and then they redirected, not to her, to Marcus, as if she had said something that needed translation, and Marcus was the translator. "That's an interesting point, Francine. Marcus, what's your read on the Q2 projections?" The first time it happened, she noted it. The second time, Francine has raised a good point, but I think Marcus's experience here is worth. She noted it again. The third time, she put her pen down. "Let me pause us here," she said. Her voice was even, almost gentle. "I want to make sure we're all operating with the same understanding. My name is on the door now, which means when you have a question about company direction, the response to that question comes from me, not from Marcus, not from anyone else in this room. From me. That's not ego, that's chain of command. Are we clear?" Silence. "Marcus," she said, turning to him, "what is your read on Q2? He told her. "Good. I disagree with the third point. Here's why." And she laid out, in flawless, uninterruptible detail, exactly why his projections were optimistic in the streaming division, and exactly what she intended to do about it. When she finished, the room was quiet in a different way. One board member, Gerald Osei, 60 years old, one of Evander's oldest friends, looked at her for a long moment and then, almost imperceptibly, nodded. One person, one nod. She filed it away. 3 weeks into her tenure, a story appeared in Media Week, an industry trade publication that every executive in the building read before their first cup of coffee. The headline, "Davidson Media in Turmoil. Sources." Question, Francine Davidson's readiness for top role. She read it at 6:15 a.m. at her kitchen counter, still in her robe. She read it twice. Then she put her phone face down, finished her coffee, got dressed, and drove to the office. The article cited anonymous sources close to the company. It said employees were uncertain about the leadership transition, It said key executives were considering their options. It said Francine had, in her first board meeting, alienated senior leadership with an aggressive and inexperienced management style. She called a full company meeting for 10 a.m. Not just the executives, everybody, every floor, every department head. She had them pipe it through the building's internal broadcast system because, and this was her father's daughter speaking, this was a media company, and she knew how to use the medium. She stood in front of the camera in the broadcast studio. No podium, no notes. Good morning. By now most of you have seen the Media Week piece. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't exist, and I'm not going to be precious about it. Here's what I will say. Anonymous sources don't build companies. Anonymous sources don't sign your paychecks. And anonymous sources don't get to define the direction of Davidson Media. What does define this company, what has always defined this company, is the work, the stories we tell, the communities we serve, the standard my father set, and that I intend to raise. If you have questions about my leadership, my door is open. I mean that literally. I have instructed my assistant to keep it open every day from 8 to 9 a.m. for any employee who wants to come in and speak to me directly. No appointment, no filter. For everyone else, let's get back to work. We have a company to run. She cut the feed. And then, because she was also her father's daughter in the way that mattered most, she walked directly to Marcus Webb's office and said, I know it was you, and I need you to know that I know. We can proceed from here however you choose. He didn't confirm or deny. He didn't need to. The look on his face told her everything. Here's the thing that the men on the 14th floor fundamentally misunderstood about Francine Davidson. They thought she was fighting upward, trying to convince the people above her, the board, the executives, the C-suite, that she deserved to be there. And because they believed that, they focused all their energy on that level, keeping the narrative cold at the top, controlling the flow of information, making her look isolated. What they didn't realize was that Francine was moving in the other direction entirely. She spent her lunch breaks on different floors every day, the content team, the digital division she'd grown herself, the broadcast studios where people worked rotating shifts and rarely saw the 14th floor at all, the mailroom, the editing suites, the marketing bullpen. She listened, she asked questions, she remembered names, not in a performative politician way, but because she genuinely was interested, and her memory was extraordinary. She asked people what wasn't working, what they wished leadership understood, what they were proud of that nobody had ever acknowledged. Within 2 weeks, she had 6 people she trusted on every floor who were sending her honest information that wasn't being filtered through Marcus Webb's network. She also made 2 strategic appointments. The first, she promoted Diana Osei, Gerald Osei's daughter, who had been grinding in the digital analytics department for 4 years and was, by every metric, exceptional, to Director of Digital Strategy, reporting directly to Francine. The second, she brought in from outside the company a woman named Kezia Hart, former VP at a major broadcast network, feared and respected in equal measure, as her chief of staff. The message was clear. She was not waiting for permission. She was building her cabinet, and one by one, not through fear, not through politics, but through the oldest leadership currency there is, competence and care, she was winning the company. Marcus Webb had been COO of Davidson Media for 22 years. He had survived 3 economic downturns, 2 public controversies, 1 near-hostile takeover, and the full arc of digital disruption in the media industry. He was not, by any measure, a stupid man. But he made the mistake that smart men in entrenched power always make. He confused institutional knowledge with institutional authority. He thought knowing where every body was buried meant he got to decide who dug the graves. He went to 3 board members, privately, separately, deniably, and suggested that a formal performance review of the CEO after 90 days was not only reasonable but prudent, given the circumstances. 2 of the 3 agreed. One of them, and this was the mistake, told his wife. His wife played pickleball on Thursday mornings with Gerald Osei's wife. Gerald Osei called Francine on a Friday afternoon. "You need to know something," he said, and he told her everything. Francine spent the weekend preparing. She did not panic. She did not call lawyers. She did not leak anything to the press. She sat with the information, and she thought, the way her father had taught her, 3 moves ahead. By Monday, she had a presentation. Not a defensive presentation. Not an explanation or a justification or an appeal for patience. A 60-day operational review, compiled by her team, verified by an independent analyst she had quietly engaged, showing division-by-division performance since her appointment. Targets hit, processes streamlined, the digital revenue trajectory she had already begun to reverse. The content pipeline she had approved that was tracking ahead of projections. Hard numbers, clean data, irrefutable evidence. She scheduled a full board meeting for Wednesday morning. She didn't tell Marcus what it was about. She sent him the invite with everyone else. They came in expecting a routine check-in. Marcus was relaxed. He had his notes. He had his allies seated strategically. He had the quiet confidence of a man who believed he had already won the argument before it started. Francine was already in the room when they arrived. She stood. She did not sit at the head of the table. She stood. And when everyone was settled, she pressed a button on the conference room panel and the screens came to life. 60 days. Every metric. Every division. Every number compared against the same 60-day period under the previous operational structure. She talked for 25 minutes without stopping. Clean, crisp, devastating in its precision. The kind of presentation that leaves no room for but or however or to be fair. When she finished, she clicked off the presentation. "I understand there's been a conversation," she said, "about a 90-day performance review." The room went very quiet. "I'm not opposed to accountability. I think accountability is the foundation of good leadership. So I want to be very clear. I welcome a review. Any time, by any metric you choose. But I would ask that we apply that same standard consistently to every leadership role in this company, including roles that have existed for 22 years. She looked at Marcus. He looked back. "Now," she said, "is there anything else to discuss? Or shall we move to the content acquisition agenda?" Gerald Osei, quietly, deliberately, began to clap. Slow. One board member joined him, then another, then another. Not all of them, not yet, but enough. Marcus Webb did not clap, but he also, for the first time since February, had nothing to say. And in that boardroom, in the silence of a man who had run out of moves, Francine Davidson became the CEO of Davidson Media. Not on paper. In fact. The Media Week leak. Francine had known from day one that it was Marcus. What she hadn't had in those first weeks was proof she could act on without looking like she was retaliating from a place of insecurity. By week 8, she had it. Kezia Hart, who had come from a network where internal politics was practically a contact sport, had, within her first month, mapped the communication channels within Davidson Media with the precision of a forensic accountant. She found the thread. A series of calls between Marcus and a journalist at Media Week, a journalist who had, 3 years prior, written a glowing profile of Marcus Webb that referred to him as the quiet architect of Davidson Media's dominance. The calls were from Marcus's work line, logged in the company system. He had been, and this was the detail that Francine found almost poetic, so certain he was untouchable that he hadn't even bothered to cover his tracks. She didn't call a press conference. She didn't send a company-wide email. She did not do any of the things that people who are performing power do. She called Marcus into her office on a Thursday at 4 p.m., closed the door, put the documentation on the desk between them, gave him time to read it. He read it. "You have options," Francine said. "You can resign, effective immediately, with the full severance package your contract entitles you to, and a mutually agreed statement about your departure. Or we can involve the legal team and the board and handle it the other way." He looked at the documentation. He looked at her. "You're serious," he said. "Marcus," she said, not unkindly, "I have never once been anything other than serious." He resigned the following Monday. The statement said he was pursuing new opportunities and wished Davidson Media continued success. It was gracious, professional, exactly as Francine had written it. She did not gloat. She did not announce what had really happened. She simply moved forward. 6 months after Evander Davidson's funeral, his daughter stood in the lobby of Davidson Media headquarters and unveiled a new division. Davidson Impact, a content fund dedicated to amplifying underrepresented voices in media. $20 million of company capital committed over 3 years. Grants for independent Black and brown filmmakers, podcasters, journalists, a mentorship pipeline, a studio residency program. It was the program Francine had proposed, quietly, through proper channels, as VP of Digital, 2 years before her father died. The program that had been tabled in a committee review without a clear explanation. She didn't say that at the unveiling. She didn't need to. The people in the room who knew, and several of them did, felt the weight of it anyway. Media Week ran a cover story. The headline this time, "Francine Davidson is not her father's shadow. She's building something new." She framed it, hung it in her office, not out of vanity, as a reminder of what people said when they thought they knew what you were, and what they said when you showed them who you actually are. The staff survey at the end of her first 6 months, anonymous, company-wide, showed 78% confidence in executive leadership, up from 44% at the time of her appointment. Her father's longest-tenured employee, a woman named Miss Roberta, who had run the Atlanta broadcast studio since 1994, stopped Francine in the hallway one afternoon and held her face in both hands and said, "Baby, your daddy is somewhere grinning so hard right now." Francine held it together until she got back to her office. Then she let herself cry. Just for a moment. Just for him. Then she picked up her phone, called Diana, and asked about the Q3 numbers, because the company didn't stop for grief, and neither did she. Here's what I want you to take from Francine Davidson's story, because it would be easy to tell this as a triumph over the bad guy's story. Marcus Webb as the villain, Francine as the hero, and everybody claps at the end. And yes, there's some of that. I'm not going to lie to you. But what actually happened in that company was more complicated and more important than a villain getting his comeuppance. What happened was that a woman walked into an institution built by her own blood, carrying her own name. and was told by the weight of the room that she did not belong there. And rather than fight that room on its own terms, rather than become harder, colder, more transactional, more like the people who dismissed her, she chose a different path. She went down to the people. She listened. She built. She was precise when precision was required, and she was human when humanity was called for. She led with her father's values and her own strategy, and she did not apologize for a single thing about who she was. This story ends with something Francine reportedly said at a Women in Leadership conference 8 months into her tenure. Someone asked her what advice she would give to women walking into rooms that weren't built for them. She said, "Don't redesign yourself to fit the room. Redesign the room." And honey, that's not just a quote. That is a whole sermon. That is a whole career. That is a whole life's worth of understanding about what power actually is and who gets to hold it. Francine Davidson did not inherit Davidson Media. She earned Davidson Media. With 3 degrees and 30 years of her father's example, and the particular intelligence of a woman who had been told no in quiet rooms and decided that no was simply the beginning of the conversation. This one's for every woman who walked into a room full of crossed arms and chose to stay anyway. You already know what you're doing. The room just hasn't caught up yet. That is the story of Francine Davidson, the boss chick who didn't come to prove herself. She came to run things, and run things she did. Drop a comment and tell me, what was your favorite moment in this story? Was it the board meeting? The Marcus confrontation? Miss Roberta in the hallway? Because I need to know I'm not the only one who felt that. And listen, if you are not subscribed to Corporate Chaos Scandals yet, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button right now. Hit that like button. Share this video with somebody who needs to hear this story today. We do these every single week, and we are just getting started. I'll see you in the next on.